Howdy, guys, and welcome to night 68 of Big Brother Season 23's Overnight Feeds Recap. And welcome to Cliff Notes from outside the Big Brother house. Hope y'all had a fantastic weekend. We're starting a Monday, which means veto ceremony today. So let's talk real quickly what's happened over the weekend, and we'll get right into the live feeds. First of all, as a recap, Tiffany and Hannah are on the block. Kyland's HOH. Tiffany and Hannah are on the block, with Tiffany as a likely target. Kyland, in addition to HOH, also won veto. So he has full power. He'll be making a decision later this morning or this afternoon. We're not real sure when it'll happen, but he'll make his decision regarding whether or not to use a veto. Chances are he's going to keep the nominations the same. We're expecting that. But there was a lot of campaigning, a lot of promising, a lot of alternate options thrown out last night. So we will talk about that. And there's a little chance that things could change. I kind of think not, but we'll talk about that. So on to the live feeds. First of all, we've got Tiffany talking to Derek F, Big D, really trying to fix their relationship. You know, these two have been at odds for a while, and really it goes all the way back to when Brittany, was it Brittany or Christian on the block? I can't remember now. It goes back to when Brittany came upstairs and Derek F and Azah came with her, and Tiffany got upset. There's been some bad blood with them ever since then. So they're trying to hash that out. Tiffany's trying to explain that she was getting wrongfully blamed for a lot of stuff, that there were some misperceptions going on. Lots of talk about miscommunication from both of them. It's a lot of that kind of conversation, some apologies, things like that. But I just feel like both of them really are just going through the motions. They're saying what they think need to be said. Tiffany obviously fighting for her life at this point in time. And so I just don't see a whole lot of sincerity from either one of these two right now. In fact, later, Big D is talking to Xavier, and he's kind of griping about the whole conversation with Tiffany, and that yeah, she said all this stuff, but it's kind of late for all that. And Xavier agrees, says, look, her apologies could have come a lot earlier than when she's on the block, if that's really what she wanted to do. So I think they see through to a certain extent, which doesn't mean that Tiffany isn't sincere in some ways, but it's just a little difficult when you're on the block and now you're making your apologies. It's tough for people to take it at face value. And so they're not really buying it quite as much as Tiffany thinks they're buying it. We've got Tiffany and Kyland are in the backyard. They're calling out Big D for some of the terms that he uses to refer to women, and I won't throw out the terms that y'all have heard them if you watch live feeds. He probably does need to get called out. He uses some terms that make me feel uncomfortable sometimes in the way he references women. They call him out, and some of he says, it's kind of a gay thing and all that. It doesn't always excuse it, but they call him out for it. I'm glad they did. We'll see if he maybe holds off on some of those terms a little bit going forward. All right, interesting development, not really gameplay, but just the overall what's happening in the Big Brother world. We know there's going to be a double eviction on Thursday, right? Or at least we're going to see it on Thursday's show. But the house guests have discovered that they're going to be losing the yard early. I think they were told basically after dinner last night they'd be losing the yard, which is super early. Normally during my season, during these guys' seasons, season, you tend to lose the yard either early Tuesday morning or very late Monday night. Is about typical. So for them to lose the yard on a Sunday night immediately has got them thinking that something maybe a little unusual is going. Also, they've been told they're going to be getting up an hour earlier than they normally do for a veto day. Normally, veto ceremony, you get up at 9 o'clock in the morning. They're being told they're going to be getting up at 8 instead. So with those two things combined, they're all wondering what's going on. Could there be a surprise eviction that may be coming up that they need to be prepared for? They don't know about the double. And we don't know exactly what's going on as well either. But here's an interesting thing. I saw a mention on social media over the weekend saying that Julie Chen never said that next Thursday's double eviction is a live episode. And we have had Thursday night episodes that weren't live before. I don't know if we've had them with double evictions, but we've also never had two double evictions in a row. So if it's not a live episode, could it be that maybe we're going to have the double eviction start early? And if that's the case, if it's not live, it is possible that the next HOH could be the slip and slide competition that I mentioned yesterday. I thought we were going to not be able to get this season. It's a possibility. If it's all taped or maybe the first part of it's taped, I don't know. The whole idea behind a double eviction is everything is happening so quick. You don't have time to really prepare between them. So I think once they start, whenever they do, it's all just going to hit bam, 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 very quickly, one after another. So everything we see on Thursday may not be live. It may all be happening on Tuesday or Wednesday instead. And I'm okay with that. I don't care so much if it's live or not. Now, the problem is if they have this happen and it's not a live episode on Thursday, that means we could have an extended downtime where the feeds go away completely. They don't want us to see what's happened before Thursday night's episode. So we may not have quite a lot to be updating here over the next few days, but we'll see. We'll have more information tomorrow. I'll talk to y'all about it then. So, but be prepared. We could have something a little unique happening right now. All right, we've got some more conversations. Azah and Tiffany are talking in the kitchen. Remember how Big D was kind of griping about Tiffany's conversation to him with Xavier? Well, Tiffany is talking to Azah and saying, "Yeah, I think the conversation with Big D went kind of well. We hashed out a lot of stuff. I explained a lot of things, a lot of misperceptions that he may have had about me. Yeah, I think it went really, really well." Well, not so much, Tiffany. Not so much. What's it? Kylan says something about perceptions are my facts of reality or something. I don't know. But yeah, Tiffany thinks it went better than Big D does. Big D and Xavier are talking some more. Big D is saying that Azah is thinking that the men are working together. Well, yeah, they are. And Big D kind of acts upset that Azah would even ask the question. I don't know why. I think it's they are working together. I think it's a legitimate question as well, because certainly Azah realizes if the three guys are working, and Big D says, "Oh, I don't know why she even cares since she's working with us anyway." Well, she cares because if the three guys are working together, Azah's got to feel like she may be number 4 out of the final 4 group, that as soon as Tiffany and Hannah are gone, Azah could be next. And that's a legitimate concern and probably correct. So Big D's a little upset that she even bothered to ask the question, but I'm glad to see Azah asking some questions that need to be asked. Xavier, they're both talking a little bit about their relationship, the guy's relationship that Big D's so upset about. And Xavier is telling Big D, saying, "Look, I'm not planning on flipping on Kylan. I'm not going to try to do anything fancy or tricky or anything that will disrupt the three of us from being final 3." So he's trying to make sure that Big Deal feels comfortable in this final 3 position. That there's no funny business going on. Kylan, we got Kylan talking to the cameras, wearing his HOH robe. So he's getting the power. The power is rising in Kylan. Kylan's wearing his HOH robe. He's talking to the cameras, saying, "Yeah, I'm going to have a quick dinner, but after that, we're going to have plenty of hard conversations. I know they all want to go to bed, but we're going to have plenty of hard conversations tonight." Joy, joy, joy. Just what I was waiting to hear. Thank you, Kylan. We've got a lot of talk. They have dinner. Azah fixed pizza. I'd said before, Azah, wonderful cook. So much stuff that looks so good. Well, she's fixed homemade pizza in the house last night, which looks incredible. So they're all sitting around there. They're eating pizza. They're just sitting around the dinner table afterwards. There's lots of talk about the Cookout Alliance, how much that affected their personal game. Would they play the game differently if it wasn't for the mission that they were on with the Alliance and all that? Really, the only person in the group who's talking that feels Big D says that he really thinks that everyone's played individual games, that he would play it exactly the same whether the Cookout Alliance was the thing or not. And everyone else is saying, "Yeah, no, we haven't been playing individual games. Maybe you've been playing individual games, Big D, but the rest of us not so much." And that's a valid distinction, because if you think about it, everyone else in the house pretty much in the Cookout Alliance had their little side person, their pawn that they had to manipulate, they had to work with, they eventually had to cut loose. Big D never had that. He had Frenchie so early in the game, so it almost doesn't really matter. But beyond that, he didn't have his side person the way everyone else has. So Big D's game has been a little bit more individual and personal as compared to everyone else's. And he's expressing those thoughts to everyone right now, and everyone else is disagreeing with him when he says that. And with that, Kylan begins his one-on-ones. I think, I don't know, maybe 10 o'clock or so Big Brother time, if I remember. But Kylan's began his one-on-ones. He started off with Azah, and that may be the most relevant conversation to talk about now. Kylan is suddenly, he seems so settled on keeping Tiffany and Hannah, and suddenly he's maybe bouncing around a lot of new ideas. One of them that's been brought up is an idea about pulling off Hannah. He mentioned at one point maybe pulling off Hannah to try to develop some goodwill, some relationships with her, then put Big D up in her place. And then I've heard he's talked a little bit about maybe sending Big D home. He hadn't said he's talking about it or anything. He's just kind of thrown that up as a, hey, what if? So he's not quite as definite as he's talking to Azah. He's throwing out a lot of different scenarios about what could happen, including putting up Big D and actually sending him home. But he does tell Azah, he says, look, I'm not coming after you. I've never come after you, and I'm not going to be coming after you today. But I am wondering, would you be okay if you went on the block? And she said, well, I'd rather not. And he said, oh, okay. So pretty quick conversation, but I'm sure that doesn't make Azah feel wonderful even hearing that mentioned. Now, remember, Azah's already said, if she has her way, she's going after Kylan. Well, when he starts talking about possibly putting her on a block, it's not going to help keep him safe if she gains some power. I don't know why you would ask someone like that unless you've already decided, because otherwise you just create paranoia and concern and just a little bit more distrust. But he asks her, she says no, he says okay. Again, he's throwing out a lot of different scenarios, but he also tells her, because she's getting worried as he's throwing all these things out. And I think she says something like, hey, are you not decided? Are you still debating? And he says, I'm just trying to see how I move forward next week. I'm going to be vulnerable since I can't play HOH. I'm just trying to look at all the scenarios. Doesn't mean I'm going to do it. I'm just looking at everything. We know the way Kylan works. He goes through 500 different scenarios, even if he's already settled on the one he wants. It's more about him gaining information than him actually considering some of these options, but he's still throwing them out there. But Azah eventually says, look, if it comes down to it, I would keep Big D over anyone else that Big D is up against. And he says, well, what about if Big D was up against Xavier, which can't happen this week, but it's thrown out there. And she says, well, I don't know. If that's the case, I'd probably defer to what you wanted to do, Kylan. You know, so she basically ends up at the end saying, I will vote out anyone who's up against Big D. But when it comes right down to it, I'll also vote the way you want me to vote, Kylan. So she's kind of trying to play both ends a little bit. And at that point, I guess it seems like once she says that, maybe some of Kylan's thinking about putting up Big D and sending him home has kind of gotten shut down, that maybe he realizes Azah's not going to flip. It's going to create a lot of animosity with her if he was to go through with this plan to send out Big D. So I guess she answered the questions correctly, because at the end he says, all right, well, welcome to the final five. Congratulations on that. And so she's excited. Before they shut it down, she asked Kylan, she says, has Hannah or Tiffany ever thrown out my name, thrown me under the bus? And he thinks about it for a second and says, nah, I don't think so. And I've never really heard him talk about you like that. Here's the thing. Would you be so forthcoming in saying, no, they haven't said that? Is it going to make it more likely that Azah would be willing to work with Hannah or Tiffany, whoever the remaining woman is in the house after this week? Or if something was to happen, both of them were still around, does it make it just that much more likely that Azah tries to work with the two of them as opposed to staying with the guys? If I was Kylan, I probably would have said, yeah, but not horrible. You could kind of hem-haw it around. So there you go with Azah. Xavier's up next. Xavier's taking credit. He's telling Kylan, said, yeah, I convinced Hannah to offer you all those promises for safety and everything if you would just keep her safe. I got her to give you this big sweetheart deal. That was all me. That was me convincing her, Kylan. So he's really trying to make sure that Kylan knows how supportive Xavier is of Kylan and his plans and his safety. Kylan makes a little mention, again, a different scenario. He says, look, I've thought about it. I could take Tiffany down just in order to get more info. And I don't know exactly what he means by that. If he takes her down, puts someone up, maybe he thinks that people feel threatened, or he can get more information from Tiffany with the promise of taking her down. I don't even know. I just know that Kyland likes his information. The more, the better in terms of Kyland and his information gathering. So he throws that out there as an option. But at the end of the conversation, Kyland says, yeah, I'm going to leave the nominations the same. I'm not touching them. It's going to be Tiffany and Hannah, and I'm just going to leave it exactly the way it is right now. And again, I think that gets back to him and his conversation with Azah and realizing that he's only going to create more damage if he starts getting too fancy with these picks. It's just leave it the way it is, send one of them out the door, let the three guys work together and continue on. Next one-on-one is with Hannah. Not a whole lot to report. You notice as we go later in the evening, I'm summarizing these a little quicker and quicker, but a lot of it's just because there's not as much conversation that's really worth covering. With Hannah, he basically just says, look, the nominations are staying the same. I'm not changing them up. He says that the vote's likely going to be 3-0. I can't guarantee it, Hannah, but you're not going anywhere. And I think at one point he says something like, I can't promise that you're final five, but basically you're final five. So he's basically let Hannah know that not only are the noms staying the same, but she's good. I think he says something like, hey, I can't give you the best possible scenario that you were looking for, but it's not bad either. You're sticking around. And I think Hannah makes one last effort. She says, is there any chance that you and I and Tiffany could continue to work together? We could do something differently. And Kyland responds something like, I just don't know that I can trust Tiffany enough going forward to make that happen. I just don't think that's going to work. So props to Hannah. She's trying to protect her tightest ally to the very end. But decision's been made. He's called it out. And so Hannah says, okay, well, thanks for saving me at least. And let's remember, Hannah made all kinds of promises to Kyland. We'll see if any of them are actually honored. I kind of don't think so, but we'll see. And now finally, Tiffany. Really not much to report about Tiffany's conversation with Kyland. There's a lot of talk. Tiffany's talking about her meeting with Big D and how that went and how they hashed everything out. And then they moved back to a lot of past events this season, especially their little conflicts that they had, Tiffany and Kyland, revolving around the Christian vote and the eviction and who came to who. And Kyland ends up telling Tiffany, saying, look, you don't always communicate well as an individual. I'm not really sure exactly what he means by that, but he says, you don't always really communicate that well to me. And some of the stuff you did earlier in the season, primarily he's bringing up some of the Christian eviction week, saying some of that hurt me because you didn't come to me. You weren't really forthcoming with me. Kyland gets upset if he doesn't think that he's involved in all the plans, the actions, everything that's happening inside the house. And Tiffany definitely has had moments where she hasn't been 100% transparent with Kyland, as is to be expected in the game of Big Brother. But Kyland took it a little bit personally, so he's kind of calling Tiffany out a little bit for some of that in the past, which tells me that Kyland is just trying to throw out some excuse. They aren't excuses; they're valid, but throwing out some reasons and preparing Tiffany for a bit for when she hears that her name is not being pulled off the block. I don't think Tiffany expects in a million years that she's actually going to be pulled off the block this week. I think she's smarter than that. She knows the game well enough, but she's trying. So I think Kyland's preparing her a little bit. So they talk about that. Eventually, everyone's in bed by 2:30 or so in the morning. Everyone's getting to bed a little early, knowing that they're going to be woken up early and thinking there could be some special competition or something going on. And there's been talk, maybe it's some kind of luxury competition that has nothing to do with the game itself. And that could be as well. They're about to that point where they could do something like that. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's not pre-taped double evictions and all, but it's exciting thinking there could be something a little uncertain going on in the house right now. But eventually the lights are off about 2:30 or so. Sleeping arrangements. Tiffany ends up getting sleeping in bed with Kyland. As of when I shut the feeds down to record the show, they were still in bed together, cuddled up nice and tight with each other. So Tiffany, she's trying. She wants to make sure no one else is in there talking to Kyland between now and the veto ceremony, and she wants to be as close to him as possible. I don't want to be the cynic and say it's being done for gameplay only. I do think they've got a little bit of a connection, but but there's certainly a gameplay element involved in Tiffany up there, hanging out with Kylan as much as possible, just in the hopes that even if he doesn't use a video on her, maybe she can convince him to use it on Hannah. They can make something happen so the women stay safe this week. I don't think it's going to happen, but we'll find out this afternoon or whenever a veto ceremony occurs. Hopefully, we have live feeds, and I'll be back in the morning to let y'all know what's happened with the veto and whatever other uncertain things may be happening inside the house. Until then, guys, y'all have a fantastic Monday. I will see y'all tomorrow. Cheers, my friends. SKD 143. Bye.